Curious to what makes a great network engineer? What skills are required? And how to develop them? Well, in this episode, we have senior network engineer Marc Colburn share what it takes to be a network engineer. He really knows his stuff, so you don't want to miss it. So keep listening.
Do you want a career in cybersecurity? Are you unsure how to start? Curious what it means to be a cybersecurity professional? This is the Cyber Job Hacks Podcast with Dr. Jeff Colburn. He's a 30-year industry professional and the founder of Team Caveo, a company that specializes in helping people launch cyber careers. Join us on this podcast as we explore what it means to be a cybersecurity professional and how to get started. Welcome to the show.
Are you curious if a cyber career is right for you? Do you want to get into cyber and don't know where to start? Are you working in IT and looking to grow? Well, schedule a one-on-one cyber career coaching session with me to discuss where you are currently and how you can best move forward. Go to coaching.cyberjobhacks.com or click the link in the show notes to schedule your session today. Welcome to the Cyber Job Hacks Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jeff Colburn. With us today is Marc Colburn. We'll welcome him back to the show. He's a senior network engineer / architect, and he has several years in the industry, and he really knows his stuff. Marc, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me. Looking forward to talking about stuff.
Awesome. Yeah. So today I want to talk about the skills required that make a great network engineer. Like in the height of my career, right? The great ones, we knew routing, right? And we knew it inside and out, and we knew Cisco command line. Like we would say, we can make routers sing and dance, right? That's really what you need to know to be a great network engineer. But like today, I feel like there's a lot more an engineer needs to know. Like you hear things like network security, Python, Ansible, Terraform, infrastructure as code. You're a senior level engineer. How much is that true? And what level does a network engineer really need to know it?
Yeah, I think, some of that has remained the same, and I think some has changed, right? And I think a lot of that varies based on, industry, right, size of company you work for. We still have need for the hyper specialized, right? You still need people that understand these protocols at a deep level. But I think you'll find that we're having more and more mix, right? More like sometimes we call it requirements bloat in these engineers, like for requirements for these companies. Companies continue to want to do more with less, right? So the more and more falls in the network. And so I think you'll find that in a lot of companies, these senior guys are having to adopt automation, right? There's no other choice. Just because they can't do their job without it.
So what about the different industries? Like, are there different skill sets? Like we had a little bit of this early on, right? We had enterprise engineers and we had like service provider engineers, or like the service provider engineers. Those are the guys who really knew like BGP, MPLS, and then the enterprise guys were they knew like OSPF and all the campus based technologies. Is you still have that today, or is it even more diversified by industry?
Yeah, I think it's even more diversified, right? If I think about even with enterprise, right, you'd have like someone who works at a large enterprise may differ in skill set from someone who works in a smaller mid-size or even small business altogether. And what I mean by that is you may have in a very small business, for example, someone who you might not even have a true network engineer, right? You might have someone that knows very basic networking, but they're also doing like server admin, or they're doing like light scripting here and there. Contrast that to like the large scale enterprise where you actually have siloed teams within, so you might have not even just a network engineer, but you might even hear about like, oh, this guy's the WAN guy and this guy's the data center guy, right? Like you'll have sometimes different skill sets within the same team for an enterprise. And I kind of contrast even from an enterprise looking at, like hyperscaler, for example, like, you might have automation in both, but hyperscaler automation is completely different from what you see in enterprise. Those guys are going to have way deeper coding knowledge, right? They're going to do actually writing full-blown applications that manage the network, full telemetry, and a lot of times it's custom to that job environment, right? Versus an enterprise where you might use them either off the shelf from the vendors, right? I always joke around that every vendor has, a tool for every part of the network instead of just one tool.
Right.
But nonetheless, you have that automation there as an option. Or you might see adoption of other open source tools, things like the Ansibles of the world, the Terraforms, right? Where you might not see those often in the hyperscaler who would have, rolled their own.
Yeah. So now you mentioned like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. Go ahead. You're good.
No, I was going to say, so you mentioned like data center engineer, enterprise engineers, so what are those, what are the specializations? If we could kind of, I don't know if we can categorize people or not, like Wade today is, but are there specializations and, and how can we define them or what would they be?
Yeah, you try to codify that. I think, in network engineering, we still have the guys that are hardcore routing. We still have guys that are, dedicated wireless people, and we still have people that are, dedicated to like collaboration, right? And then there's subdivisions, right, of that. So if you think about routing, with an organization, you might have someone that focus, or at least traditionally, someone that would focus, purely on WAN, right? And they would know, how the MPLS circuits work at their sites. They would know maybe how their IPsec solution, over the internet worked. And then you'd have data center guys that literally that's all they did was like data center switching, and trying to simplify that. I think some of this is starting to kind of merge into a way. More and more I see technologies starting to be used throughout, which I think is kind of cool. Like one of the big shifts in the industry is we've been doing more EVPN and VXLAN all over the place, right?
Right.
We see it within data center, we see it within enterprise now, but even service provider design, you're starting to see more of a spine leaf type architecture with EVPN service delivery, right, over MPLS. So it's kind of interesting to see these skills be reused, right?
Right.
At just different depths of knowledge, which I think is pretty cool.
So say you're young engineer and you got like your CCNA and you just decide, hey, I want to grow and become a network engineer. And I just don't want to be a network engineer. I want to be one of the great ones, right? I want to be that top tier network engineer. Like, what advice would you give them? Like, what skills should they be focusing on, or should they be picking a specialization? Like, what would you tell that young guy today that's starting out?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think, the industry definitely has shifted. I think there's still value in traditional networking knowledge, but it really depends on what you like, right? Like if you look at some of the old, like industry names, like you think like a Jeff Doyle or something like that, trying to mimic that type of background is one type of path, right? A lot of people, they'll study networking and then they'll shift right into like automation, and we now have like this big trend of everyone's trying to jump on ML and or AI ML. And try how you apply that network engineering. That's a valid path, and I think you'll find specialists and people that really blaze a trail in that industry. If you want to be more of a traditional network engineer, I think that's valid, right? And one of the things I think, you take with that, right, is that the type of jobs you pick have to be strategic, right? We talked about these different specializations, company sizes, right? Those kinds of things will limit what you can do and what skill sets you can take on. So if you have a goal of, hey, I want to be one of the great routing engineers, like I want to focus on that and specialize in that, I think you need to be very tactical about what type of jobs you take. And I think the skill set that you develop, what you study is extremely important, right? And I think, the typical path for people is like the old CCA, CCB, CCIE. I think that's still relevant. I think having that depth of knowledge is important. So my advice, right, turning back to what you said, for someone that wants to go that path is, just never stop studying. The reality is that you're going to have to constantly study. You got decades of knowledge, right? Within everything you got to catch up on.
Right.
The reality is that things repeat, things are patterns. So the more you study that and the more you lab it out and really know it, the better you're going to do. And just think about every career move that you make. You're trying to basically utilize that skill set. So you may shift from, traditional enterprise to more of a service provider role, or going to a vendor, where that's depth of knowledge is important still. I joke around that in enterprise, more and more we find that we can run networks without having specialists, because it's good enough. It's good enough engineering.
Yeah, I encountered that.
Yeah, exactly. So, you basically, to sum it up, always study and be strategic about where you go.
Very cool. So, is there like a base knowledge that every network engineer should have, like regardless of what specialization they might be in? It's like would you say there's like a core knowledge or a body of knowledge?
Yeah, I definitely think there should be. So, like, for example, I feel like any engineer you put in front of a whiteboard should be able to, basically draw up and discuss how a packet moves through a network. How routers process packets, how switches process frames, right? Those kinds of things. I feel like that's universal. I feel like when I run into people that can't explain those types of things, I feel like that hurts, like, their reputation.
Right.
Like, are you actually network engineering?
Right. Right. So, like, I'm still network engineering. I'm out there engineering. I love engineering. But it's funny how network security has become more part of the network engineer's job than in the past. So, like, I'll give you examples. So, like, previously the most we dealt with was a firewall, right, with perimeter firewalls. But now, like, if I'll be working on SD-WAN, and all of a sudden, now I got a deal with SASE, right? Because I have to incorporate a SASE solution with the SD-WAN solution. So it seems almost like there's more and more integration into security into integrating into what we do. Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I think about, once it kind of goes back into industry, right? So if you're in an enterprise today, you are going to have more of that blend. And we're talking about the requirements below, where you put on the many hats as a network engineer. The reality is that, your WAN kind of topology now is dependent on this, SASE solution, which I can go on a rant about how this is like a rehash of the old service provider as a service type things 10 years ago, right? But nonetheless, this is it's security as a service, but they're third-party companies now, right? So the reality is that you, as the network engineer, have to understand how this works with your environment, right? What are the routing points,
right?
How do you get in and out of it? And then typically you're going to end up having to configure it too. And so, but this is, once again, like I talk about that, it just depends on industry. If you are that hyper specialized person and you're in the right environment, you may never touch that. You may only be doing, routing and switching with hopefully good practice design, securing those routers and switches, right?
Right.
Maybe doing network security with firewalls, but yeah, I definitely agree. On the enterprise side, we've seen a big shift to having to do more.
Yeah, I feel like there's almost like an expectation when people talk to me, like I should know all these security controls that go within the network. Like it's almost assumed that I can talk SASE, that like I should have firewall knowledge. I should most we used to do was we used to harden our routers, right? We knew, like, hey, turn these on or turn that off on the router to harden it. And firewalls, like everybody, firewalls are, to me, it's never been difficult for firewalls. It's just about objects and rules. But now when I get pulled into a scenario or a project, is like, hey, Jeff, you should. That's almost like they expect me to be able to know this at expert level. So it's just something I saw, and I just was curious if you were experiencing the same thing.
Oh yeah, no, I just agree.
So you talked about these skills. That hey, these are the skills of a network engineer needs to know. These are the foundational, the core skills they should have. These are some specialization skills. So, how does somebody develop those skills? How do they learn it? How do they get hands-on experience with it? Like, what would you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely basic training pathways, and I think I'll take the enterprise. I'll pick on that for an example. The typical enterprise now as a network engineer, you're going to see requirements from companies. They'll be like route switch, probably Cisco, may have Arista or somebody else on there too. Then you'll also see stuff about, hey, you're going to have cloud experience now because they're partially in Amazon or Azure, right? And then you'll see stuff about automation. And so somebody's like an outsider or someone who's just getting their foot in, but man, that's a lot of different domains. Like, where do I start? I think part of that is really, creating a flow, right? So if I was to start with somebody zero to hero, I think about, obviously you need that fundamental networking knowledge, right? So at least the CCNA. And then, but the reality is that as part of your learning journey, you're probably going to have to deviate and start taking things like the AWS solutions or certified solutions architect, right? Those types of certifications or the Azure equivalent, right? So you understand those networking constructs, right? And so to your point, how do you get experience with these things? Some of it's just cracking open the book and reading, obviously, right? Putting down topics to a freaking spreadsheet and then mapping out what reading resources you need.
Right.
Right. Some of it, I mean, we talk about all the time, is the hands-on component. I think with anything, even with these new types of technologies, you got to get hands-on, you got to get the stick time, whether it's routers and switches and you're emulating them on something like a EVE-NG, or virtualizing, or you're doing GNS3. But, even with Amazon, the reality is that they have free compute time. You're studying that type of stuff. You want to understand the networking constructs within Amazon, spin up some free instances and work on it. Right.
Right.
Because that's going to be the environment you see in production. And the same thing with automation. I mean, the reality is, most engineers at this point if they are doing automation, it's in Python. Whether it's the tools they use that are written in Python or they're actually writing Python themselves. And so for that, same concept of, hey, what are the fundamental resources? What do I need to understand to really do my job? And I think for programming especially, taking something you do within your day-to-day job and trying to write a project around that is going to be a lot more beneficial to your learning than just being stuck in tutorial hell, right? Of just doing tutorial. I think about my own career, right, with programming, and I think one of the first things I did in a production network, I had like 1,000 routers I had to log into and just check that a command was there. And I wrote this really terrible Paramiko-based script that wasn't multi-threaded or anything, but it did it for me.
Right.
And I just let it rip, and it dumped all my output into text files, right? If the command wasn't there, I knew which routers I had to log into and fix. And I think, actually seeing like all the study I had done up to that point really helped me pay off and go, I actually can do this, right? Like, I actually know something here. And I should keep building on those skills. But I think that's important for anything, any topic domain, is validating your skill set along the way, making sure it actually works the way you think it does.
Right. So, talking about building that lab, right? EVE-NG or, something like that. I even use like Cisco's modeling lab, the free version. I'll log in and lab something up real quick. So like when you're preparing, like say you're going after a new job and you see the requirements and you see a technology you're not strong in. Is that something that you'll lab up before the interview just to get proficient?
100%. Yeah. If I, well, we talked about this a little bit too before previous podcast, right? Like preparing for the interview, and you think about, I treat everything I can know about the company as like homework, right? And so that job requirement is one piece of that. They expect me to know, whatever it may be. Let's say they just want PHP knowledge, right? I've heard of PHP a bunch, but the reality is I'm still going to review. And so part of that, um, is spinning up in a lab, right? I'll build a lab based on what I think. How can I demonstrate these technologies, especially the ones that I might be weaker on, whether it's a different vendor, whether it's actually a different technology I haven't worked with in a while. But I think, why not, right? Like you're going to have a different level of depth in your knowledge where you can actually put hands on the keyboard and implement it.
Yeah, that's so true. You used a term a couple of times as we're talking, and I'm not sure if people know what this is. You mentioned requirement bloat. Can you describe what that is and what why we're seeing it more?
Yeah. So when I say requirements bloat, what I refer to is this idea that we have to keep doing more and more responsibilities, right, outside of the typical network engineering. And so I think we see this one, this companies want to be cheap, but but two, sometimes people just don't know. But reality is that we're going to continue to see this trend. People want to keep doing more with less. So you'll have companies that'll hire, on the smaller end, like I was talking before, you might have a guy that's doing a little bit with the SD-WAN solution of the company. He's also doing Microsoft Server type stuff. And then he's doing cloud provisioning, right? Like that, right. It's like the worst case scenario. You got everything, and then, but even within some of these bigger companies, I mean, you're starting to see collapsing of job responsibilities. Like your enterprise route switch guy might also be responsible for wireless design, or at least keeping the wireless lights on,
right?
And maybe they'll bring it outside VAR, like vendor authorized reseller or consultant, for the big type project work. But the reality is that you, as the kind of the admin, right, stop keeping the lights on day to day for the company. You're having to know wireless, wired. You're having to mess with 802.1x OS systems and how to maintain them. So maybe you know a little bit about Linux. The point I make with that is that you're not just doing Cisco routers and switches anymore. You're going to find that you're going to have more of a diverse skill set. You're going to have not necessarily an expert in these other areas, but I find that some of the things that benefit me, right, do a better job is that you're a little bit more generalized, right? And I give an example. I work for a vendor. I find that a lot of the products are built on Linux in a lot of cases, whether it's appliances or even just fundamental routers and switches. Even could be Unix based, right? And so the reality is that I had my RHCE for a while, which is the Red Hat Certified Engineer. That knowledge is constantly useful. I use that like every single day, whether it's navigating terminal, transferring files, checking on services within one of these appliances that the vendor's built. And there was never a part of my networking career where everyone was like, hey, you have to know Linux, right? But the reality is that there's so many things are built around Linux that taking the time to learn that helped me do better at my job, right? And I think you're going to find that, with this requirements blow, that there's certain things that you need to go after that are just going to make your day-to-day life easier.
Yeah, and that's so funny because like when I started in the late 90s, you had Unix. And, it's like, hey, if you knew Unix, right, it made your life easier, right? And then Unix went away, right? And then all of a sudden Linux came back, which is basically the Intel-based flavor of Unix, right? It's Linux running on a x86 box versus a Spark machine. So it's just funny that how that came full circle, like it disappeared for a while. And then it came back, and I think it even came back even stronger. Like you said, a lot of the platforms are Linux-based now. everything's built on that. Like nobody's foolish enough to build their platforms off Windows, at least if they want something that's durable anyway, and they're not patching every week. So yeah, that's just funny how that, but I would agree, like Linux and even knowing some Python, it's going to make your life a little easier as an engineer these days.
I agree, man. And then just to your point, like with Linux coming back, it's, you look at early 2000s, the reality is, even if stuff was built around Linux or Unix, it wasn't really exposed to you. These appliances, switches that you never touched that shell. Whereas like now it's like it's encouraged. Like, oh yeah, we have this shell you have access to.
Right.
Take advantage of it.
Yeah, before it was just you knew the command line, like you had the Cisco command line down pat, but you didn't really pay any attention to the operating system underneath it. But like you said, now it's like almost expected that you know it. So
that's how I play.
Hey, Marc, I just want to really thank you for coming on the show today and sharing this. This is great information for anybody who wants to get started as a network engineer, wants to know what skills to develop. I think this is really great. So, hey, thank you for being on.
No problem. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Awesome. Hey, and I want to thank everyone who is listening to the show. I hope you found this useful. And if you have, let us know, or make some comments in the show notes. And until next time, have a great week. Do you want to be part of an online community of like-minded people? Join us at cyberjobhacks.com, where you'll receive the latest industry news, cybersecurity career trends, invitation to free events, and exclusive offers. So join our private Facebook group at cyberjobhacks.com.
Thank you for listening to the Cyber Job Hacks Podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, please share with a friend who may be interested in becoming a cyber professional. Also, please leave a review on Apple Podcast. Your feedback is greatly appreciated, as it will shape our future episodes. Meet us here every Monday as we discuss the cyber job market and how to launch your career. Until next time, have a great week.